The best marketing is just doing this for a while. Make friends, find other people doing it, mutually hype each other's work. There's always the person who's lucky. They release their first game. It's a smashing success. They make $1 million doing it. Whatever. That is not the standard experience indie game developers. And just prepare yourself for it.
Welcome to the Draw Your Dice podcast, the show that calls on the champions and new contenders of the tabletop RPG arena. My name is Jeremy Gage, and I am learning about tabletop game design and publishing. If you are a budding game designer or a veteran looking for fresh musings, stay tuned as we learn about the inspirations, processes, and philosophies of professionals in the industry. Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Draw Your Dice podcast. My name is Jeremy, as you heard in the intro, but today is not about me. Today is about someone special. Another brain trustee. Oh, they looked behind themselves.
Who's special?
Who is it? Today, I would like to introduce our guest, Kegan.
Woo! Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm super excited to finally have you on the show.
Yeah, it finally happened. Here we are.
We've teased it out for months.
Since the beginning of the podcast.
It's absolutely true. Kegan, as always on this show, would you just give a brief introduction of yourself as how you present yourself to the world for those who may not know who you are?
Yeah, I'm Kegan. You can find my work. I'm at Kegan.EXE on all the things, basically. Yeah, we're gonna talk games and stuff today.
Perfect. We're trying to get for shortest episode here today.
Let's go. Power through this.
As of the recording of this episode, Viditya holds longest episode that had to be broken up into 2 parts. We're looking to smash this thing out in 15 minutes.
The faster this is, the longer it's going to take everyone to realize I'm an idiot. So,
Stop. Stop it. There is no self-deprecation on my show.
Oh, no. That's that's my entire brand.
Kegan, for everyone to just showcase your journey into game design, what was sort of the first role-playing game that you really got into, played maybe regularly or something to that effect? And then what was the first game that sort of prompted your spark into game design?
So I actually just learned this the other day. My first role-playing game wasn't D&D somehow. I played a single session of Fate. We did character building. We were planning a campaign, and then it fell apart. And I went 4 years out playing another role-playing game.
Perfect.
And then I played D&D. So really, I came up on D&D. I say came up. I've only been playing role-playing games for maybe 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Really, truly not very long. And then I took over DMing for my group shortly before the pandemic started. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm enjoying, home brewing things. People publish this sort of thing. I'm not doing anything better. So I started looking at publishing for, DM's Guild and stuff. And then was it was right around the start of the pandemic. And, there's always something going on with Wizards of the Coast. I was like, I'm not sure. I want to attach my name to this brand. I'm not sure this is the look for me. And somebody actually introduced me to Babblegum Sam, I think is their name, on Twitter. But someone introduced me to Sam, who was doing a game for Chris Bissett's Wretched and Alone jam. And I was like, oh, what are indie games?
So fast. You're just riding the wave.
Yeah, truly, I really haven't been doing this very long.
I love that. That's amazing. I mean, I think we fit in that same vein of generation when it comes to that, because I've only been playing role-playing games since I was... God, when did I first play D&D? 27? So, no, 26? Something like that. So 4 years, and then I just got into game design last September. So, or not last September, September before the pandemic started. So...
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And you have been smashing it out of the park as far as being I don't want to say the word new. I don't want to say amateur. You're professional. You've been paid for your games, right? So, but
Yeah.
you produced a lot of content in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I have a sort of theory that things are good enough sometimes. I very much came up on the concept of not letting, what is it, perfect be the enemy of good? So I have, sometimes things are just good enough. Sometimes it's like as far as you can take a project and you just release it there. Keep moving.
I love it. There's definitely some weight behind that whole. And here's, the other thing attached to that is that you always have the authority to redo something you've already done. Like, I think there's a lot of that what you're saying, the perfect being the enemy of good enough, right? Is like, you sort of you don't work with your old content anymore. Some people can take it that way, right? Like, you put it out, you're done with it, you never look at it again. But I think there's always this spectrum of like, or authority that you have, that you can always revisit something and be like, okay, I've learned things and I would like to improve this game, right? When we talk about like second editions, revised editions, whatever have you.
I've actually, the first real game I introduced, it's not the one we're talking about today, but I made Fragmented was my first like real approach at making a game. And I put it out. It's great. I love the game still. Holds a special place for me. But I think like 3 months after I put it out, I was like, oh, I could just redo this whole thing. So like relayed out the whole game, got new art for it, cleared up the whole thing. And it's, it's like Fragmented. I think it's Fragmented Reloaded now. Because I was watching a bunch of The Matrix right when I was doing it.
Perfect.
But yeah, like Fragmented 2 was just like, okay, cool. We're better at this now. We could do better on this now.
And I love that film was sort of the partial inspiration for that remake as well. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's not the one we're talking about today, but
go ahead.
But yeah, that whole game was actually inspired by a Netflix movie that I truly can't think of the title of right now. But yeah, I sort of have that get inspired, quickly bust out a game, and then it's like, okay, we'll get back to this later if we need to.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Well, what a great segue, kind of, into talking about the first game. We'll talk about Phanta.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, so, why don't you give, because I was about to, but I realized that I'll do a poor job at it. Why don't you give a brief intro as to what Phanta is for everyone?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Phanta was a game I put out for the Record Collection Jam this year. It is a 2 to 5 player role-playing a game about people who... Oh god, I'm so bad at plugging my own games.
You got it. I'm riding the wave.
People who the Earth was destroyed 42 years ago, only one city, it's the city of El Dorado Springs, Colorado. It's the only city that survived, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of lore for a short game, but yeah, it's like about what happens next for the people who are still there.
On the topic of a lot of lore, I mean, yeah, the lore bit is chunky, but I think it's the perfect amount for getting an idea of the shape of this sort of almost dystopian, it feels like The Last of Us kind of situation.
Yeah,
it definitely has those feels, and there's just all this juiciness about like overcoming hardship and community and things like that, because you're all sort of in it together. It also has it feels like it has, I've never seen it, I'm not going to watch it, listeners, so don't come at me, but I've never seen The Walking Dead, but I feel like it has Walking Dead sort of energy.
So I've also never seen The Walking Dead.
Perfect. So don't come at us, I'll fight you.
Yeah, it is very much a game for my role-playing group and how we like to play games, in that there's a good bit of lore up front, but still plenty of room to just sort of make shit up at the table.
I super agree with that. It seems, it has a basic 2d6 rolling system, add that all up together. What were some of the touchstone inspirations for mechanics, lore, and everything like that?
Truly.
If any.
So for touchstones, design touchstones, how the rolls work, stuff like that, I thought I came up with it by myself. I was like, cool, these are sort of like the number ranges, let's do this. And I showed it to my husband after finishing it, and he was like, oh, cool, yeah, that's the Powered by the Apocalypse rolling system. Like, it is? I had never played a Powered by the Apocalypse game at that point. It's not quite the exact same table, but it's remarkably close. Come to find out, that's just how the numbers work.
So you're like the second coming of Vincent Baker, basically.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. No, and then lore-wise, it's really just based on the song Phanta by Le Tigre, who, like I said, it was a record collection game, so they were all inspired by a song or a band or an album, and that was a song about an actual historical event, which was a fun thing to have to research to make this game, of 42 years ago, a group of hippies thinking the meteor Icarus was about to destroy the planet.
I love it. I thought that was just you putting in lore. That's amazing.
No, I have the article somewhere. I paid for a New York Times subscription just to get one article from, 40
Damn you,
years
New York
ago.
Times.
No, they really thought the fucking meteor was going to hit the Earth, even though, there were like a million scientists who were like, it's a few trillion miles off. Like, we're good. Don't worry about it. And they were convinced that Colorado was going to be safe. It wasn't specifically El Dorado Springs, but they all took a bus up to Boulder, Colorado, and hid out for a week, which is just sort of like a wild story.
I love it, and I think it totally fits with the game you created here. For anyone that's like not looking at it, I love sort of this. It has like this typewriter feel almost. It has like this weatheredness. You did a great job with like the layout design of the entire book. It's really good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a couple of, I think it's 3 separate typewriter fonts depending on the section. But yeah, they're all just free. They're all Google fonts. I think they're Special, Elite, and Lecton are the 2 I use the most.
I love it. So, yeah, why don't you give us a little... So what was the story that you were trying to tell here with the game? Because, I don't want to use the phrase games of this size because it puts into a category, and I don't want to do that. But usually there's some sort of very specific evocation that you are trying to distill in a game of this size, right? So, like, when it's not 300 pages blown out over 3 books, D&D stuff, it's like, this is the story you're telling. There's no other audibles you can pull here. So what were you trying to capture with this game?
It was really just a game about, just like a bunch of people surviving, trying to make a better future for themselves. It is very specifically designed around the idea that there isn't a correct way necessarily for this to happen. There are some like loose plot points. There are some loose story hooks near the back of the game, but nothing to even really describe where those go. It's very much, I want every table that plays it to have just a wildly different experience. Yeah.
Do you have the bit about the Martians in the back? Because I was reading it, I was like, oh, this seems like very like full standard stuff. And then you explain the challenges, and then the Martian at the end that like just fully can decimate you like without a second thought. I was like, holy shit, this thing is huge.
Yeah, it was
10 physical, 14 mental stress, and possesses the shit out of you. Scare me, dude.
Yeah, I run very high lethality campaigns with my home group, so I just wanted a sort of like a shout out to just like totally decimating your playgroup with something. I have a playgroup that's very expected. It's definitely not a thing for everyone. But, I just wanted to be like, the game presents everything as sort of like low lethality. You like take stress when you get hit, and very specifically, characters don't die unless players want them to. They're just written out of the story. Right?
Sure.
They just stop adventuring. But I did sort of want something that right there at the end that was like, oh, but if you did want to completely decimate your playgroup, this is how I would do it.
Yeah, this is your permission to do so.
Yeah, this is the back of the book is just a bunch of sample stats for different, types of enemies you might come across. Just because I'm really comfortable, building enemies on the fly, just throwing an encounter together in a couple of seconds. But I understand that's not going to be the norm with every playgroup. So I wanted some just quick examples of, like roughly this much health they should have. They should have roughly, this in stats sort of thing. So you could just quickly look at it and be like, okay, cool. That's, it's a wolf in the book, but it's going to be a giant eagle or something in the playgroup. But it just really gives you permission to just hack it as you see fit.
Yeah. I find, like, when I talk about, I've also homebrewed, like, monsters for D&D in the past, but I find myself being more able to flex that muscle when the game more relies on, like, tags and, like, general harms, like, conditional things for making up homebrew. So, I don't know, this is just a conversation about, like, a person's cognitive load that they can take on when it comes to particular systems, right? Like, the crunchier, like, probably... speaking to you and me, we can bust out a D&D 5e monster in like seconds and be like, hey, this thing's fucking tough. You better run. Right? But I find that potentially it would be easier when you design games that have a homebrew that's sort of like tag based, right? This thing is melee. It does 2 harm. It uses fire as a tactic, right? Like those 3 things that you put out there gives enough information for people to be like, oh, I get why or why not we should be engaging with this, whatever it is. Yeah. Do you have a favorite piece of tech or content in the book that, like, you're just like, I love that I wrote that?
God, I really should read my own writing sometime, shouldn't I?
No, you're okay.
Yeah, actually, I really like, this is the thing I think I did well here, is the sort of crit system in this game, where if you roll 2 6s, you get a permanent boon that just changes the way, it very much changes the way the characters interface with the world, more than being like, oh, cool, you get extra damage, you see a little more. So it's things like, you're trying to talk to a trader, you're trying to, like buy something off him, and you happen to crit on your communication check. There we go.
Found it?
Yeah, it's on the whiteboard behind the screen. Yeah, but you like crit on your communication check, you're able to, not only is he, does the trader have the thing you're looking for, or they'll give you the discount you want, but they'll permanently remember you better. So it sort of gives you a NPC you can just always go to in the area. Or, God, I have all these examples of them in the back. I really should just look at them. So you you crit on a knowledge check, for example, and the example in the book is that you start having prophetic dreams, which are sort of a thing lightly referenced with some of the NPCs in there already. But you start having prophetic dreams, and you just know a little more about, different places you're going in, even if it doesn't make a ton of sense for your character. But just sort of stuff like that just changes how you interface with the world, I think is really interesting in this sort of game.
I love that. I love a sense of, like, permanence, right? Because I think sometimes, speaking more to like traditional adventure games, well, I guess maybe not even so, they also have permanence, but there's always this, like, if it's not written in there and you give players an advantage now, that advantage earned may not be present later, right? It's always this kind of like wishy-washy thing. And I love that you've created something that says, hey, when you give a boon out, it sticks. Like, this is going to be here for a really long time. They're like probably the next 4 or 5 sessions. So remember that, because they could come back to it at any point, right? It's like, it's also like when you consider things like bonds in other games, how bonds are sort of that permanence in NPC relationships or something, or in a place. I love it. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a fun bit of design. I think permanent boons were the thing I was most excited about writing the game.
And do you have like a favorite piece of lore that you wrote in the game?
Favorite piece of lore? So I've been writing, and I guess this is probably going to segue into Star Heist fairly decently too, which is nice.
Perfect.
But I have been, there's sort of a Phanta extended universe, I guess, where I am writing more things for Phanta. So very like, I think I saw Spencer do it first with Light and the season passes that all sort of change how the game works just a little. You know, it'll introduce new rules. There's always a little bit of new lore in each of them, just new ways the world work. And I think it's really interesting. So I've been doing that with Phanta. So I am having a little bit of a hard time remembering what lore is out there already, what lore I have in a document on my computer for what comes next.
Give us the sneak peek. Tell us whatever you want to tell us.
Yeah. So I have been writing a series of adventures that use the plot hooks present in the book for groups that don't necessarily just want to homebrew the whole thing. which is great. So it is a sort of cosmic horror themed. It takes all of the plot hooks present in the book and brings them to a conclusion that sort of leads you down this cosmic horror path where, you know, the meteor was sent to Earth by something unearthly. There was a reason everybody else thought it was going to miss, and that's because it should have. And then after this one, I'm going to recontextualize all of the plot hooks towards something else. So, you know, we're going to do cosmic horror first, and then we might look at, like, okay, we're going to do, like, zombies next or something. And we find a way that all of those plot hooks work in towards, like, a different end goal.
That's amazing. That's very, very cool. I know that as of the recording of this episode, Spencer is, and along with me, and now it sounds like you tangentially or like in the ether on another side of the country, are talking about this concept of live tabletop RPGs. So it's like taking the concepts of video games, kind of mostly MMORPGs, are like they have expansions and patch updates, class changes, new adventures are being introduced, and they always sort of redesign the base game around those things.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that you're doing this as well, and we should definitely have like a group chat of you, me, and Spencer talking about this sort of live iteration of games, because me and him have been talking about, like, what if we just didn't do a print game? Like, what if our games were only digital?
Yeah,
you only read them on your phone or iPad or whatever. Sure, does that limit an audience to some extent? Maybe a little bit, but, you know, the future is coming.
Yeah, so Phanta's amusingly the first game I've ever done a print run for, and I truly think there's a lot more you can do with digital, just out of having, like, easy form fillable documents, stuff like that, where I think there are a bunch of advantages to exclusively physical or exclusively digital sort of game like this. Yeah,
we talked about, like, creating, like, a website where, like, it, you know, taking lessons from, like, Roll20, but not using Roll20, creating your own sort of, like, Phanta website where it has, like, like you said, form fillable character sheets and constant updates on the game, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and however that schedule works for you. So, like, building those ecosystems, you can make apps for phones and shit. Like, there are already, like, 10,000 D&D character sheet apps, so why not make one for your game?
I think that's a really cool thing, and I'm not here to plug them or anything, because they're not paying me, but
same.
Being able to make digital character sheets for Playroll, I think, is one of the more exciting things that website has currently. Star Heist has them, Phanta has them. All of my future games, I build out character sheets on Playroll before I build them out for what might potentially be, like, a print run of them, just because I think it's such an interesting way to, like, use that technology.
Yeah, especially when you're figuring out how to lay out the character sheet, because, you know, the real estate on Roll app is very vertical and semi-limited in that scope, right? So you figure out, like, okay, I might be a little bloated in this particular avenue. Let me see if I can rework this mechanic to a smaller frame or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's fun to... It's a thing I like doing anyways, but, like, working around a tool or working around an aesthetic or an appearance or whatever, rather than working and then figuring those things out.
Yeah. Very good. Amazing. Phanta's good. Buy it. Don't hesitate on this. You're hearing it right now. Pause the episode and buy this shit. Buy Kegan shit.
Woo!
Trends! Hashtag trends. So in this little piece of, you know, you've been a long-time fan, I'm sure.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah. Aw. So in this segment...
Completely threw you off, hell yeah.
Yeah, my heart grew 3 times its size today. Here we talk about things that you're seeing in the Twitter space that you are finding really interesting, that people are kind of bringing out in game design, like they're calling for something, or they just keep repeating it over and over again. Or maybe you're finding there's some sort of trend that's happening that's being detractful for the scene that you kind of want to bring to light. And then also, also available, are there any trends within yourself that you sort of want to speak into the ether for listeners that you want to see more of in game design?
Yeah, I think we briefly covered something sort of tangential to this, but I'd like to highlight a little more, which is modular game design. So things like light, frame, music. Spencer's really good at this. I'm going to keep...
Yeah. Hi, Spencer.
Yeah, hi, Spencer. But yeah, this is a thing I've been doing with Phanta. This is a thing. Star Heist is like a weird take on the same engine, but just sort of continual updates for the exact same game. Just putting out new content for it. Finding something that works and just like keep doing it if you have an audience for it, rather than thinking you have to release something brand new every month.
Yeah, it sort of creates this returning customer aspect, right? Like there's two forms of that. One is that people get really attached to you as the designer.
Yeah.
And they like you as the author, right? Kegan always puts out good shit regardless of what the title is. The other version of that is that people get really attached to Phanta, and then you start creating content for Phanta, and that keeps them coming back, right? And it's sort of, the best comparison that might be the most basic for people who are listening is D&D, right? D&D keeps spitting out D&D every year. They will never stop. They'll never make a different game.
Yeah, they're going to release D&D every month for the next 300 years. We're never going to escape it. But yeah, it creates a D&D audience that is willing to buy not only every product they put out, but also every product anybody else puts out related to D&D.
Exactly.
And having the space to do that within indie games is really cool.
And it's also this feedback loop thing, because not only does D&D do that model, but when we think about Forge in the Dark products or PBTA games, right, they are feeding back the loop to the original game. Like, oh, I bought Band of Blades and it says it runs on the Blades in the Dark system. If I'm a designer or I really love Band of Blades, that might cause me to go buy Blades in the Dark just to check it out, right?
Yeah.
To see if it scratches a different itch.
Yeah, for sure. You see it a lot with Morkborg, too, I think is another really great example of the exact same thing, where there's sort of a Morkborg ecosystem. They can keep putting out content for it, but other people can keep putting out content for it, and people will buy it because it says Morkborg on it, which is great. Like, this isn't me talking shit about it.
Yes, yep. Yeah, I love and to kind of point at modular design as well. I know that I've had Spencer on here talk about it too, and it's just this concept of like, not only does it mean like put out more content for things, but it also creates like, because again, if we compare it to the not the baseline, I hate saying the baseline for this, but if we can compare it to D&D, right? D&D is also a modular game where the base rules are in the player's handbook, but then you can add Xanathar's Guide to Everything on top of that.
Yeah.
And get more subclasses. Or you can add Volos and get more monsters, right?
Yeah.
And like you can omit those things as well, right? You could do just the player's handbook and Volos and not have those extra subclasses, and that creates sort of a different quote unquote game.
Yeah,
right?
you have the player's handbook, you have the monster manual, and then whatever else you plug into it is, a little modular bit. And you can have as much or as little of that as you want.
Yeah, your version of D&D essentially. Your home group's version of D&D. So I really love it because I think that it allows people to sculpt their experience with your game, and then that gives them the opportunity to fall in love with it more, because they're like, oh, I love the cosmic horror version of Phanta. I really hope that like at some point Kegan releases like a couple more challenging creatures or something, right? Like a little update to the game. That would be really cool for me, because that's what our group likes, right? So I love that. I think it's an amazing thing to think about as like a business practice too.
Yeah, I think it was a conscious decision I made going into Phanta, was to do the sort of, it's the player's handbook.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think there's, as much as I personally have my own qualms like Wizard of the Coast, D&D things, and like make a different game, you guys, but it is interesting to learn from the model that ultimately, we have to admit, they are successful.
Yeah, they created a really successful model, and I think a lot of people try to escape doing the same thing as them, And not like doing sword and sorcery, but like, you know, creating 100 products in the exact same game.
Yeah, and creating that ecosystem for that game, right? And we see it with video games all the time. Like World of Warcraft isn't suddenly going to become what's another pop? Guild Wars 2, right? Like they're not going to turn into the other, but they are going to keep creating content that brings people back to their game as long as they exist in that perpetual state.
Yeah.
Unlike a one and done game like Devil May Cry, but then you even talk about like franchising, like, ooh, I love Devil May Cry 1, I'm gonna love Devil May Cry 2, right? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love Devil May Cry. I'm gonna buy all the DLC for it. It's also very like in the same vein.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Great trend choice.
Thanks.
Trend choice.
I was so worried about choosing a trend, and then I was like, oh, wait, we were just talking about this. Let's go back to it.
Yeah. Star Heist. Hello, Star Heist. Hi. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Round 2. Woo. So, Star Heist, you know, give the intro to it, but it was originally, you know, here's a fun fact, everyone. I am not good at getting into shitposts. Like, I don't understand shitposts. I don't recognize them in any form. But I know this sort of came as, like, initially a joke of stats, and then it became something so much more.
Yeah, it was definitely, I tweeted, you have 3 stats, rootin', tootin', and shootin'. And then I was like, God, you really could just change the stats in Phanta, and it would be a completely different game. So I did. I made Star Heist in, I think, 8 hours, bottom to top, because I have a really bad habit of making game layouts I'm not using, and then just, like, saving them in case I have a shitpost I want to get through real quick. So I just plugged it into a layout I had laying around, recolored it, and threw a little fluff on the end of it. But yeah, it's Phanta, but your 4 stats, 'cause I ended up giving us 4, is rootin', tootin', shootin', and bootin'.
I love it so much. Yeah, what is the premise of Star Heist?
Yeah, so it is, you are essentially a space cowboy. There's a space train. It is on a rail. It is not jet powered. It is on a rail. It goes from Earth to Mars. We don't ask how that works. It does not matter. And you're there to steal a bunch of shit. You have 4 stats. It's great.
I love it. That's so funny. But even still, just with those small pieces alone, because what I want to credit to is that I already have such strong imagery in my head of what this is going to like. And that might be like a core conceit of who I am as a person, because I watch a lot of like Gundam and mecha shows, and they always have some sort of like space rail system that's not jet powered. So like I know exactly what I'm looking at when you talk about that, right?
Yeah, it's so stupid. It's incredible. I love it. It's really stupid though.
But basically this is a game where your whole intent is to, this feels like it has sort of a more finite design to it, because the whole objective is like get on the train, steal this stuff, get off the train, right? There's not like more to
There is no
that,
campaign play in this. This is a one-shot game for sure. Yeah, it was very much like I wanted a really fine-tuned experience that used the Phanta engine sort of directly to be a thing that sells Phanta. So Star Heist is free. Phanta is, I think, $10. I really should know the price of my own games. This is embarrassing. It is
They'll know
$10.
when they click on the link to buy it.
I have it up in a window. We're good. Yeah, Star Heist is free. Phanta's $10. I'm still a relatively new designer in that I haven't had like a break that brings me an audience of like a few thousand people to download a game. And
Sure.
it can be a little difficult to get people to download things from new designers. Like to spend $10 on a game when there's so many other games out there. So I was like,
especially, excuse me.
Oh, you're good.
Sorry. Especially when we talk about the, it's always hard to talk about like what is the value of a game to people, right? Especially when you're a new designer. People are probably going to be willing to spend $80 on John Harper products because, at this stage they consider John Harper to keep putting out bangers, right? So it's like, ooh, another banger. But why I point that out is that doesn't make your game that you create, no matter how big or small or whatever, any less valuable than any one of John's games, right?
Yeah.
So if Phanta is worth that $10 or even more mark, then charge that. And so what if it doesn't get bought up? I wouldn't want people to race to the bottom, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right?
there's
like,
no
to try and undercut the market.
There's that whole thing you always hear about. There's, $5 in indie games, and we all pass it around or whatever. Which, I mean, it's not true. For one thing, it is just about creating an audience that's like willing to download your games, willing to, spend the $10 on a game from you. And it just, I don't know, you have to like build an audience first, and that's where it gets difficult.
Yeah. And what's nice about Star Heist, now that you sort of revealed to me that it's sort of it's almost a quick start. Honestly, it's a quick start for Phanta. You know what I mean? That you just put out there and like, hey, get the quick start to Phanta by playing Star Heist, a one session thing. Did you like it? Buy Phanta. You know what I mean? If you want more, buy Phanta.
Yeah, and looking at like my Phanta analytics, so Star Heist, to be clear, spent 2.5 weeks at the top of the itch charts, which doesn't necessarily mean much. They're really easy to game, but it spent a decent amount of time near the top, and it did move a lot of people to Phanta. Star Heist was free, so people were getting it, seeing it was good, and being like, "Oh, cool! It's built on another engine for a game that is more designed for campaign play. Let's just buy Phanta." And I got a nice little bump in sales from it. It was a nice little experiment.
And I really love that you're being thank you for being transparent about sort of this data, because I think it really helps to inform. This show is not only about the design of games, but it's also about the business of game design. And I want this to be a space where people learn all those facets, because at the end of the day, if you really like doing this, you probably want to be paid for it.
Yeah, getting paid
that's
is
just
real
how
nice.
America works. Yeah, we need money, unfortunately. So, call it what it is. Amazing. I really love that, and I love that you sort of put out this pseudo quick start. I know that I'll probably have someone on here. Probably Chris Bissett. Yeah.
Dice Souls.
I need your ass on here. Let's schedule something. It's probably my fault. It's probably my fault that we're not scheduled yet. It actually is my fault. So I'm sorry, Chris. If you're listening to this, I apologize. Amazing. Good stuff. Do you have I know that this is built off the Phanta system, but what is your favorite part of Star Heist, if anything?
I just like making goofy games. This was just a fun thing to put out. It didn't have to be good. It just had to be, it was another, like, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be out. It's free. So there wasn't any stress behind it. It was just like fun to make it.
I love that. Rootin', tootin', scootin', bootin'. That's all I'm gonna do for the rest of my life, actually.
Yeah, they're a great set of stats. I'm glad I'm the first one. I'm saying I'm the first one to do it the same way D&D says they're world's best role-playing game. Yeah, just like citation needed.
Yeah. Can you please point me in the direction of who said that for you? Amazing. TLDR tip section. Keegan, I have a table here.
Oh no. I said I was worried about I said I was worried about trends. This is the thing I'm worried about.
No, don't be worried. You know what I say to every guest since you've been a long-time listener, first-time caller. Feel free to give towards any amount of experience that you have, and it doesn't have to relate specifically to anything we talked about today. It can be something totally outside of left field. Worst case scenario, just tell the listeners how your day went today.
On it. Sounds good.
That's going to be a 5. I should have had this thing open. And I also should have this memorized by now.
You don't need to memorize tables. That's what you have things written down for.
Kegan, under the theme of marketing, prompt of marketing, what can you tell the listeners what can you help them with?
Oh, wow. This is actually a great question. This is the one thing I know. I have tried truly 3 million things to market games, and it's just, in my opinion, I'm sure someone's going to have a better one here. The best marketing is just doing this for a while. Make friends, find other people doing it, mutually hype each other's work. But, there's always the person who's lucky. They release their first game. It's a smashing success. they make $1 million doing it. Whatever. That is not the standard experience indie game developers. And just, like, prepare yourself for it. I guess that's not really marketing, is it? But
is there
marketing
maybe, like...
is rough, and, the best market is people who like your stuff, and the best way to have people like your stuff is to just put stuff out.
I love that. Is there maybe in your trials and tribulations, is there a tool or a platform that you found for you? Not everyone's experience is going to be the same. This is the quote unquote here, but is there any tool or system that you have found useful, or that you've come to find that has made things easier, streamlined, something to that effect?
Finding discords with other game designers who are willing to talk about your game and, like, take a shot on looking at you and stuff like that has truly been the best bit of marketing I've done so far. I've done, like, paid Facebook, Twitter, Instagram advertisements. I've truly, if, like, there's a thing to try, I've probably tried it at some point. And there has been no better marketing than just, like, being friends with people.
Yeah, the pure networking of your industry, for sure. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I really attribute, at this point in the show, all of my success to the Brain Trust and how supportive they've been, and all the tangential Brain Trust friends who keep, like, retweeting me and start following me and everything like that with the podcast. It's truly been a blessing. I will not deny that, and you are a part of that as well.
Oh yeah, no, so. I love the Brain Trust. I think, let me double check. I think in this book I flat out said as much. Yeah, thanks to the Brain Trust Discord for helping me with this game. Yeah, like, including, there truly isn't a better space on the internet than the Brain Trust Discord, but...
Aww. And check out the podcast as well. Hype up Will and Adam. Check out the Brain Trust podcast. It's not just a Discord server. Also, please sponsor me.
That was a thing that took me a little bit to know. I was, I think, in the Discord for a month and a half before I found out it was a podcast.
Absolutely same. Absolutely same. I will not deny that. I was in there probably until November, and they're like, hey, new podcast episode. Like, wait a minute. What?
Yeah, I was like, I think when it happened, I asked, oh, did you all just start a podcast? Oh.
We're like 300 episodes deep.
Luckily, I like shitpost enough that I think everyone thought it was a joke, but it was a real question, listener.
I love it. I love that we get the insider scoops here. Amazing. Well, then, with that, Kegan, I think that brings us to the end of the show. It has been an absolute blast having you here. This truly in the best way. And me and Kegan have been, like, we've touched base on a couple other projects that we're trying to get off the ground, and this isn't our first conversation, but
no,
I'm glad that you could be here on this.
First podcast.
Yes, we have many more to come in the year as soon as we figure it out. Being transparent. Kegan, where can people find you? Where can they find your games? All the links that Kegan is going to share will be in the show notes down below.
Yeah, I'm really easy to find. I'm at Kegan.EXE, basically literally anywhere you can find someone online, because I have a problem. You can find my games at, I think it's Kegan.EXE. It's Kegan.EXE.itch.io, or you can use my redirect and go to Kegan.rodeo. Yeah, that's where I am. That's where you can find me.
I love that it's .rodeo.
I have a problem with buying URLs I don't need because they're funny. So I just have so many redirects sitting around just waiting.
Just holding until it becomes real. I love it.
I think Kegan.EXE.com for like a year before I did anything with it.
Wow. I think I actually have like JeremyGage.com or JeremyWGage.com saved somewhere. Pork Bun? I think I got it through Pork Bun. But anyways, it's not about me. Thank you, Kegan, for being here. Listeners, thank you for hanging out with us today and learning alongside me, because I know that I learned a lot from Kegan, for sure. And we will see you next time. Say bye to the people, Kegan.
Bye to the people, Kegan.
All right, that's a wrap. Kegan, congratulations on speedrunning the Draw Your Dice podcast, and also teaching me a ton about the potential future of the game design business-scape. All the games we talked about today, along with all the links to get in touch with Kegan, will be down below in the show notes for your access. If you like the show and found it helpful, send a tip my way by following the link tree in the show notes to my Ko-fi or Venmo profiles. Or, if you are unable to provide monetary support, you can provide support at no cost by sharing this with someone you thought of while listening to this episode and leaving a review. Both of these methods greatly impact the success of this show and lets me know that what I'm doing is beneficial to designers out there. If you want to be a part of the conversation or hang out with the alumni from the show, you can also join the DYD House Discord server. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you next time.